Hello everyone. Today we are going to do class 11 poem named Childhood, and it's written by the poet Marcus Nathan. Let's read something about our poet first. Marcus Nathan is a Norwegian poet and details of his life is very sketchy, so it is unclear that when and where he was born. He wrote this lovely poem Childhood when he turned 12. So at the age of 12 he had composed this poem. The poem is a translation and one can imagine how great it would be in his own language in which he must have composed it. Let's read the poem. It goes something like, when did my childhood go? Was it the day I ceased to be 11? Was it the time I realized that hell and heaven could not be found in geography and therefore could not be? Was that the day? Let's read the explanation of the poem. The poet wonders that when he lost his childhood. The poem begins with the question itself, that when did the childhood of the poet lost? He reflects that perhaps it was the day when he crossed the age of 11. Maybe it was the stage when he realized that the concepts of hell and heaven, about which he had been taught since his childhood, did not exist in reality because he could not find these in the geography books. When he stopped being 11 years old, he asks, was it the day when he lost his childhood? Was it the time when he realized that hell and heaven are only concepts? They do not exist in geography books, and they did not give the location of any such places. The poet realizes that he might have lost his childhood when he gained his rational outlook due to getting educated. So he asked this question, that was it the day when he started rationalizing the things, when he started asking questions behind the things, when he started realize that he was not 11 anymore, he was grown up now, and places like hell and heaven, it's just an example by the poet to say that things which do not exist in reality, they do not exist in books, they do not have any evidence. So things they do not have evidence, they do not exist in reality. So was that the day when he started realizing that rationalization behind the things is very, very important, and those things which have no logics, which have no evidences, they do not exist in reality. So the first stanza of the poem talks about the rationalism in life. The second stanza also he begins with the question itself, that when did my childhood go? He asks, was it the time I realized that adults were not all they seemed to be? Seem to be means how they appear, how they look like. They talked of love and preached of love, but they did not act so lovingly. Was that the day? So he again asks a question. He reflects that maybe the loss of childhood occurred when he was able to see through the hypocrisy of adults. So, the idea that this stanza deals with is the idea of hypocrisy. The poet says that adult people, they do appear to be loving, they do appear to be very attaching, but in reality, they are very hypocrite. The poet has started realizing that adults, as they behave, they do not act like that. So he says he realized that adults were not all they seem to be. They seem to be very loving, they seem to be very caring, but in reality, they just talk of love. They just teach about love, but they do not act lovingly. These people followed double standards, actually following and preaching different standards of behavior. So they told the poet to be loving and caring, but however, they themselves were argumentative, violent, and discourteous. Their behavior was a far cry from the love they sermonized. Sermonized means they taught, they preached to the children and advocated so reverently to the child. Perhaps, says the poet, recognizing broken trust was a major step towards adulthood. So, was that the time when he realized that adults are hypocrites? They behave something else and they appear something else, but in actually reality, they are something else. When he realized this hypocrisy of the adult world, he realized that he had lost his childhood. So he asked the question again, that was that the day when he realized this hypocrisy? Was that the day when he lost his childhood? In the third stanza also he asks that when did my childhood go? Was it when I found my mind was really mine, to use whichever way I choose, producing thoughts that were not those of other people, but my own and mine alone? Was that the day? He says that, asking the same question again and again, but with different options. He is trying to guess that when he has actually lost his childhood. Perhaps, it's perhaps, maybe, it was the day when he realized that his mind could not think independently, forming his own opinions and being able to take his own decisions. So, when he realized that his mind was his own alone and he could think independently, forming his own opinions, and his decisions were his alone, nobody else could force his decisions on their decisions on him. Was that the day when he realized that his childhood had gone? He gained a sense of individuality, which set him free from the preconceived opinions of others. His own opinions, experiences shape his thoughts now, and he realized that this might have been the time when he lost his innocence completely. So, in this stanza, he is talking about his individuality, that when he learnt about his individuality, his identity, that he was an independent individual, was that the time when he realized that he could not be suppressed by others' opinions and has his own brain? Was that the day when he lost his childhood? But in the last stanza of the poem, he is talked about, where did my childhood go? It went to some forgotten place that's hidden in an infant's face, and that's all I know. Now he says, in this stanza, he changes his question from when to where. The poet wonders where his childhood has gone. He reflects that maybe his childhood has gone to an unremembered place. A forgotten place means that he does not remember now. The poet also says that childhood can be found in the innocent face of a child. So, where can we find our lost childhood? We can find it in the innocent face of a child who does not have any pretensions, any hypocrisies, and rationality, any logics, and who trusts others unconditionally. In other words, a small child is full of innocence, and there one can find his lost own childhood. Let's read about some poetic devices used in the poem. First is alliteration. In this figure of speech, a number of words having the same first consonant sound occur close together in a series. For example, in the poem, the poet has used hell and heaven, that, the, day, my, mind, whichever way. All these word combinations are used in the poem and they are examples of alliteration. He has also used antithesis. This figure of speech refers to the placement of opposing or contrasting ideas together. Right? This emphasizes the difference between the two ideas and adds interest to writing. It can be seen in the use of words hell and heaven. So, heaven and hell are two totally opposing or contrasting ideas, but they have been placed together. That is why it has been antithesis used here. Next is enjambment. This figure of speech refers to the practice of running lines of poetry from one to the next without using any kind of punctuation to indicate a stop. The example is in the second line of the second stanza. Let's go through a quick summary of the poem. The poet regrets having lost the innocence that he had as a child. He feels that after he turned 12, he realized that hell and heaven did not exist as had been taught to him. He rationalized his thoughts. and drew his own conclusions. He ceased to have faith in people and became a little more skeptical. The poet could have lost his childhood when he realized that adults were hypocritical. He understood that although they sermonized on the need to be loving, yet they did not follow that dictum. They did not love the people around them. Their love was merely a facade. Perhaps he lost his childhood when he became more individualistic. He refused to share what was his. He learned to think for himself first. It was at that point of time when he learned to assert himself. The poet knows that he has lost his childhood and he laments its loss. He is saddened by the fact that he cannot regain his. He knows with certainty that childhood can be found in the face of an infant. Some themes that are in the poem Childhood. First is the childhood itself. Childhood by Marcus Nathan comes up with the themes of childhood, hypocrisy, and egotism. A close look at each of these themes can provide a better understanding of the poem as a whole. First theme is, as we can see, it's childhood. The title makes it clear that Marcus is going to write about the theme of childhood itself. He touches certain aspects that make the conception of childhood clear. It is on the idea of childhood and not about the biological time frame which delineates the juncture between infancy and adolescence. The mental image of childhood is there in the poem. It's a thoughtless state in which one does not get involved in worldly things. The person stays detached and enjoys the moment as it is. The second theme that he has dealt with is hypocrisy. Next comes the theme of hypocrisy. The poet specifically focuses on adults' hypocritical behavior with their children. When a child gets mature, parents start to treat them differently. They say a lot of things about love, but in reality, they react otherwise. At last, the theme of egotism. It adds a different layer of poetic imagination in the poem. Marcus Nathan talks about the psychological change in adults. Children remain less concerned about themselves, rather, they observe others. Kids immerse themselves in the thoughts not concerning their own. When the kid matures, his or her mind comes into action. It is alert all the time, indulged in the service of the master. Let's read something about the structure and form of childhood. Childhood by Marcus Nathan contains 4 stanzas. The first 3 stanzas have 6 lines in each, while the last one has only 4 lines. The structure of the poem is suggestive of the subject matter of the poem. There is a regularity in the rhyme scheme in the first and last stanza. In the first stanza, 11 in the second line rhymes with heaven in the next line. Likewise, geography rhymes with be. In the last stanza, the scheme is different. Go in the first lines rhymes with no in the last line. Place and face in the second and third lines respectively rhyme together. As the poem follows a subjective perspective of telling things, it is a lyric. There is another thing to point out here, that when the poet talks about the things concerning childhood, the lines become longer, and when he comes into reality, the lines are shortened. The poet becomes rejuvenated when he thinks about the fascinating things of his childhood. For the monotony of mature life, the poet becomes sad and he falls short of words. Thank you. That's the poem Childhood.